Hallelujah. Today we're going to be talking about grace. What about grace? And this is the conclusion of the teaching that we did. It's found its foundation out of Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. For by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. As we noted, the doctrine or theology of grace did not come from Messiah or Paul, but from Luther. And last week and the week before last, we began to look at some of Luther. And last week specifically, we went in depth into some of the things that Luther taught. We also pointed out that historically 3 groups emerged outside of Judaism. They were Catholics, Protestants, or Lutherans, which is Catholic reformers. Luther was a Catholic all his life. And then, of course, there are those who are the offshoots of Protestantism, which is the Anabaptists, who actually teach that a person had to be baptized as an adult when they had the ability to know the decision that they were making, and that infant baptism was not biblical. Now, you have to understand something. Being baptized as a child is not biblical, but there seems to be the indication that because John came and he baptized individuals, we don't know if John baptized children. We don't know. We don't know if John baptized mothers with babies. We don't. But we assume, because we don't see everyone that John baptized. Now, I don't necessarily agree with infant baptism, but what I'm saying is that anyone who wanted to make an argument that you must be able to acknowledge your faith and base that teaching on the Bible also have to now reconcile what Paul was talking about as far as fathers, moms and dads, or husbands and wives not divorcing one another because of the children. The children sanctified, the children being clean. And I'm not here trying to make an argument for infant baptism. What I'm saying is that the Anabaptists made an argument that being baptized as a child was not biblical. Catholics claim their authority from Peter. Protestants, a hybrid of mutant Catholics, claim their authority from Martin Luther. And Martin Luther had some big problems. And the biggest problem Martin Luther had was the book of James. James was a problem for Martin. James 2:9 says, but if you have respect to persons, you commit sin, and you are convinced of the law as transgressors. Now, we looked at this last week, but I didn't bring any depth to it. I want to today. For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point is guilty of all. Now, how many of you had that thrown at us as you talk about keeping the commands? Well, if you break one law, brother, you've broken them all. And what they're saying is that it is unfortunate that some use this passage as a means to reject the law and say it is impossible to keep the law, because if you break one, you break them all. Well, that is true when you think about the fact that if you add one letter to the Torah, you now have just destroyed the Torah. If you take one letter away from it, if you add one word, or if you take one word away from it, you've now destroyed it. So if you break one of the laws, then you're now a lawbreaker. Does that mean that because you broke one, that now you are not capable of keeping any of the law? Doesn't mean that, but that's how it's interpreted. The argument is, if you break one law, you break them all. Therefore, the logic is, since you cannot keep the law, what is the point of trying? Now, you can go along with that logic and blow the logic out of the water and say, okay, so it's okay to commit adultery. Well, no, brother, it's not. Well, what's the point? If I break one law, I've broken them all. So that you're saying that I can't keep any of it. I'm not capable of keeping it. But let's take this even further. The message communicated is that it is impossible to keep the law. There is no way one can keep the commandments, they say. The commandments are too hard to keep. You can't keep them all, so why bother trying to keep any of the commandments of the law? If you take that logic at face value, you come to the conclusion that God gave the people commandments that he knew they could not keep. This is where the logic leads to. However, the Bible tells us that the law or the commandments are not burdensome or too hard to keep. This is what the Bible teaches. Now, what your pastor teach, what your bishop and elders teach, that's something else. But here's what the Bible teaches. Just as if you break one law, making it difficult to keep the law, then we should not keep any law, because to keep any of the commandments would be an attempt to keep a commandment. Think about it. If I try to keep any commandment, that would be an attempt to keep the law. So why am I trying to keep any commandment? Does this make sense to you, or is just... If I can't keep any of them, why attempt to keep any of them? The fact that I'm trying to keep a command, like honor your father and mother. Now, you won't find a Christian out there who is not under the burden of honoring or trying to honor their father and mother. Now, this one really gets me when these charismatic Pentecostals come up with the idea to justify the illicit or the ungodly lifestyle of their pastors when they make this statement, touch not my anointed and do my prophet no harm. Now, wait a minute. Hold it. That comes straight out of the law. That's straight out of the law. See, if I had my computer, this is not mine, I'd find that verse. Somebody find it for me if you can. Touch not my anointed, or do my prophet no harm. Those are key words you can search. Jehovah's law was not too hard to keep, or burdensome, or too heavy. Here's what it says in 1 John. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. And his commandments are not grievous. Yes. 1 Chronicles. Okay. Now, 1 Chronicles. Okay, Chronicles, while you're hiding. There we go. 1 Chronicles 16. 22. Now look at what it's referring to. Verse 15, remember his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations. Where is that at? Exodus chapter 20. The covenant which he made with Abraham. Where is Abraham at? Genesis chapter 12. He also confirmed it to Jacob. Where's Jacob? Genesis. For a statute to Israel as an everlasting covenant. Jacob became the 12 tribes of Israel. Where did that happen? In the law. Saying to you, I will give you the land of Canaan, and as the portion of your inheritance, when they were only a few in number, very few and strangers in it, and they wandered about from nation to nation. This is the 40 years in the wilderness. From one kingdom to another people, he permitted no man to oppress them. And he reproved kings for their sakes, saying, he reproved kings for their sakes. So that says to me, there should be a reference to this somewhere in the Torah. He reproved kings for their sakes, saying, touch not my anointed ones and do my prophets no harm. Now, who is the anointed ones? Who? Israel was the anointed ones. Who was the prophet? Abraham was the prophet. Moses was a prophet. And there were many in the Torah who prophesied. In the Torah, remember the 70 elders? They all prophesied. 2 was in the camp, Eldad, Medad. They prophesied in the camp. So he says to the kings during the sojourning in the wilderness, touch not my prophet, touch not my anointed. And people want to associate this to their bishop, touch not my anointed. The bishop is not the anointed, it's the people that the bishop is supposed to be bishoping over. They are the anointed. You are the anointed. So you got people taking scriptures way out of context, twisting them in order to sanctify the ungodly living of their pastors that they're trying to protect. So his commandments are not grievous, for this is the love of God. If you love him, what are you going to try to do? Keep his commandments. You're not going to be saying we're not under the law, you can't keep the commandments. If you can't keep the commandments, you can't love God. If you're not trying to keep the commandments, you don't love him. Because this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. The word here means barus, or a heavy in weight metaphor, burdensome, severe, stern, weighty, or of great moment, violent, cruel, unsparing. And the word grievous here is heavy. That's a good word for it. Now, the reason why I point out this heavy, because you'll find that that word heavy is also barus. Here, the laws instituted by the Pharisees and Sadducees were heavy. They were barus. They were burdensome. This is what it says, saying, the scribe and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, all therefore whatsoever they bid you observe and do, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne. Jehovah's law is not grievous. Jehovah's law is not burdensome. It is the laws of the Pharisees and the Sadducees that was burdensome and grievous. And people confuse the two. They think that because the Pharisees and the Sadducees was the representatives of God and the teachers of Israel, that they were keeping the law, when they weren't keeping the law and they weren't teaching the law. They were teaching their commandments. They were teaching their traditions, and their traditions and their laws was burdensome and grievous. They lay on men shoulders, but they themselves would not move them with one of their fingers. This is what Yeshua says. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves. In other words, they're telling you to do something that they themselves are not doing. The same word, heavy, burden, is the same word, barus. Jehovah's law is not barus. The Pharisees' laws are. Denominational laws may be, but Jehovah's laws are not. They're not too heavy. But all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries, enlarge the borders of their garments, enlarge the borders of their garments. You know what that means? They got CCs down to their ankles. They want you to know. You see. And love. See, it's interesting. A person can see enlarge the borders of their garments and not see CCs unless you know about CCs. No, they're not wearing oversized clothes. And they love the uppermost rooms at feasts and the chief seats in the synagogues. This is why a lot of pastors are trying to get lovey-dovey with politicians so they can get invited to the dinners. They can get invited to the State House. They want the governor to know them. They want to be able to go and sing at the White House. They love the chief seats. They want to, look important and feel important. and greetings in the marketplace, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But be not called Rabbi, for one is your master, even Messiah, and all of you are brethren. It's interesting when people come here and they say, well, what do we call you? I know when I was in the church, at first I liked Reverend. Oh, Reverend sounded holy. And then elder, because see, when people call you Reverend, that means that they held you in esteem. You could tell when a person stopped holding you in esteem because they stopped calling you Reverend, they start calling you by your first name. It's like you go from elder to Arthur. Yeah. So, people ask me, well, what do we call you? I said, Arthur. First of all, if you don't put me on the pedestal, you can't take me down. Hallelujah. For he that said, back to James, for he that said, do not commit adultery, said also. So he says, if you break one law, you break them all. He says also, do not kill. Now, if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law. So what he's trying to make the case is, listen, what's really interesting, and we're going to go into some of this next week, is who is James talking to? Now, I'll give you a precursor right now. Remember, those of you who've gone through discipleship training, the first thing you want to know is when a book is written, it's who wrote it, who did they write it to, and why. Now, James tells us real quickly, James, a bondservant of God and of the Lord Yeshua Messiah, to who? To who? You mean the 12 Christians. You got to mean the 12 Christians, not the 12 tribes. What does it say in your Bible? What does it say? Who got 12 tribes in theirs? Let me see your hand. What do you have? You're not there yet. What do you have, Mom? James chapter 1. 12 tribes. 12 tribes. 12 tribes. So it's in all of you all's Bibles. The 12 tribes what? Which was scattered. Now, wait a minute. The 12 tribes which were scattered. How can the 12 tribes be scattered when they're lost? And when were they scattered and where were they scattered from? Now, James seems to know that the 12 tribes where they were scattered is going to get an opportunity to read this letter. Because that's who he's writing to. For some reason, James is under the impression that the 12 tribes are not lost. Ladies and gentlemen, we miss so much sometimes by ignoring chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. You understand what I'm saying? So James knows exactly who he's writing to. Guess what? If you're not part of the 12 tribes, then it may be a little challenging for you to understand what James is writing. Because James has a specific argument or a specific audience who would understand James' argument. Now, this is important as we look at what about grace. For he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now, if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law. So speak you and do so as they that shall be judged by what? The law of liberty. Now, understand the 12 tribes would understand and know the law. James refers to the law as a law of liberty. Not just once. James 1:25, look at what he says. But whosoever looketh into the perfect law of liberty. Now this law of liberty is perfect. Now how many laws are there in James' day? How many Christians are there? None. So you can't Christianize James. James is speaking specifically to people who know the law, people who understand the law, who understand that the law is not bondage, the law is not burdensome, the law is freedom. That's what distinguished Israel from every other nation. A nation that had been delivered from tyranny, delivered from oppression, delivered from bondage, set free by the Almighty himself. And he says, listen, no other nation on the planet is going to have the laws that you all have. I'm going to distinguish you from everybody else. I'm going to exalt you above all the nations of the earth. And here's what's going to keep you separate. Here's what's going to keep you number one. Here's what's going to keep you exalted above all the nations of the earth. If you hearken to diligently keep all these commandments that I'm giving you today, all these blessings will come upon you in abundance. You will never be in bondage again. You will always be a lender. You will never have to be a borrower. You will always be on top. You will never be underneath. You will be blessed in the city, blessed in the country. You will be blessed in whatever you put your hands to. And you got people out there who are telling you that the law is cursed. How can you curse what Jehovah has blessed? You can't do it. And for those of you half-stepping, jaw-jacking, Torah wannabes, you got people talking Torah, Torah, Torah. You got folks, man, walking around here talking about Torah, 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 and won't even wear seat. I'm watching these guys in these conferences, you know, you want to look all Jewish and you got your micro-tallit on, you know, and you want to pray prayers, and then you take that micro-tallit off and you don't even have seats on. I'm watching them as they're leaving and going to the cars and going to the airports. Where's your seats, brother? You're a Torah teacher. You want to talk Torah? Let's talk Torah. I'll show you I'm an observer of Torah. You hear what I'm saying? See, these is the teach is for the purpose so you won't forget. The fact that I'm not wearing them is an indication I've already forgotten. He said, now wear these so you will remember. So what do I need to remember them when I'm in the assembly? All the time. I especially need to remember them when I'm not in the assembly. It's easy for me to try to live and walk Torah in the midst of the assembly, but when I leave the assembly, that's when the challenge comes, when I'm among heathens, surrounded by worldly people. So you want to talk Torah and you want to carry the Torah and kiss the Torah and touch the Torah. Why don't you live the Torah? That's what I'm saying. Live it. But whosoever looketh into the perfect law of liberty and continue therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work. What work? The Torah requires work. I have to work at not doing things, and I have to work at doing things. I have to work at keeping the commandments because it's easier not to. Do you understand what I'm saying? He being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deeds. What is James saying? If you keep the Torah, if you look into this perfect law of liberty and you continue therein and not be a hearer only, but a doer of what the Torah says, you shall be blessed in your deeds. Can't be blessed outside the Torah. And this is why I believe in prosperity. See. And we're going to teach on prosperity, and just like we're teaching on healing, and just like we're teaching on the works and power of the Holy Spirit, we want all the blessings, because let me tell you something, the Almighty is still putting his people above all the people on the earth. He's still doing that. And those of you who have not heard the teaching on true biblical prosperity, you ought to listen to it, because you're going to find that one person's prosperity and another person's prosperity is not the same prosperity. I mean, you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, how, and I think about this all the time, because we want to talk about the widows and the orphans. What greater, I mean, you got a guy over in Dubai who's about to spend $20 billion on a high rise for luxury so people can go on vacation. What about having $20 billion to spend on a retirement village, a home for the elderly, a home for the widows and the orphans? What about a place where a safe haven where these individuals can be? I mean, imagine having that kind of money to spend on luxury items and self. Now, don't get me wrong, because you'll find that even these Torah observant individuals that are frugal and prudent and cheap, when they go on vacation, they want to live. They want to sit in first. It bothers me to have to walk past first class to coach. The man of God sitting in there like a sardine. I'm passing folks, they sipping on tea and lemonade and wine, and the plane doors haven't even shut. The flight attendant is already serving them and got the audacity to close the curtain so you can't see. Sitting back there with the peasants. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a man of God. Man, I can't even stretch my legs. And don't let the guy behind me recline. And you know what? It seems like they always put me in the seat that don't recline. Two flights, I got to change seats. You hear me? Headphones don't work. Seat won't recline. Sitting in the middle like this between two big guys. And while people up in first class sipping lemonade looking at you as you go by. How come they get to sit in first class? Who are they? They're not doing what I'm doing. They're not saving people's lives. They're not preaching the truth of the kingdom of the heavens. Well, now, brother, you better be careful. Yeah. It's sad that the people of Jehovah feel that way about themselves and believe they serve the king of the universe. You see this, the guy in Dubai is a prince. If we're the sons and daughters of God, then that makes us prince and princesses. How can you take on the mentality of a prince and not take on the mentality of a prince? You understand what I'm saying? Jehovah didn't put the people of Israel in a hood. He didn't put them in a slum. He didn't put them in a ghetto. They caused themselves to end up in a ghetto by violating the commands of Jehovah. But Jehovah don't have a ghetto and a hood mentality. He have a mentality to where he has a land that is flowing with milk and honey. It's got the best resources on the planet. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we got to change our mindset and change our mentality, because let me tell you something. The people of the kingdom need great wealth, because it's going to take great wealth to get this kingdom message to the end of the earth. You can't even get on a plane. How you going to go to the ends of the earth? But I'll tell you who is going to the ends of the earth. All these individuals who's preaching another gospel, talking about we're not under the law, we're saved by grace. Now you put that in comparison and you begin to look. Does it look like the church is more prosperous than the Messianic community? Preaching from the same book. Is it possible that they see some things we don't see? Or are we too busy pointing the fingers and talking and rejecting the very principles that the Almighty has given us to live by? See, we got work to do, folks. For he shall have judgment without mercy that have shown no mercy, and mercy rejoiceth against judgment. James 2:14, back to James 2. What doth it profit, my brethren? Though a man say he has faith and have not works, can faith save him? If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food. Now what is he saying? If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, that means they have need. It's not somebody who just need to borrow your coat. They don't have a coat. You see. And one of you said unto them, depart in peace, be you warmed and filled, notwithstanding you give them not those things which are needful to the body. What doth it profit? Even so, faith, if it has not works, is dead, being alone. You know, if I've got two coats and somebody is cold and they don't have one, my role is to give them one of mine. That's what John taught. That's what Yeshua taught. Yea, a man may say, thou hast faith and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show you my faith by my works. This is why Martin Luther had a problem with James. Thou believest that there is one God, thou dost well. The devils also believe and tremble. You see, there's one thing to believe in God. There's a whole nother thing to believe him. That's what separated Abraham out. Abraham believed, and it was counted to him as righteousness. When we believe what the word says, guess what? We do what the word says. If we say we believe and we're not doing what, if the word says wear seats and I don't wear seats, do I believe what the word says about seats? No, I don't. If the word says tie a ribbon of blue around in your CCs, why am I with all white ones? Even though I have seats, they're not seats, they're strings. That's all they is, strings tied in a knot, pharisaically. But what wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? This is what he's saying. If you got faith, you're going to see it. It's going to see it. You know how you know a poor person is poor? How do you know a poor person is poor? I mean, you can see poverty. A homeless person, you can see it. A homeless person looks homeless. A prostitute looks like a prostitute. A wealthy person looks like a wealthy person. A poor person looks like a poor person. Some people are able to hide it, but for the most part, you can see it. You know when you're in a poor neighborhood. You know when you're in a wealthy neighborhood. You can see it. You can see poverty, you can see wealth. And why are you talking about poverty and wealth? Because you can see faith. If we watch and look, you can see it. You can hear it. You can hear it in people's conversation. You can hear doubt in people's conversation. You listen to people and they'll tell you where they are. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he had offered Isaac his son upon the altar? Father says, take your son, your only son. He did it. Seest thou how faith walked with his works, and by works was faith made perfect? See, you could talk about faith all day long, but if your faith don't have works, then your faith is in vain. Can you see why Luther, who is teaching faith alone, you don't need works, not of works, brother, no works involved in this faith. Well, you can't have faith without works. And the scripture was fulfilled, which says Abraham believed God. Abraham believed. How do you know he believed? Because he did what the Almighty told him to do, even though he didn't want to do it. Can you imagine? You've waited your whole life for a child, and now Father says, I want you to kill him. Imagine that. But Abraham knew this. He was incapable of having a child by himself. He understood that this child that he had was from the Almighty. And since the Almighty gave him the child, the Almighty had every right to tell him what to do concerning the child. Too many people get things from the Almighty, and now the Almighty don't have any say. You see then how that by works a man is justified and not by faith only? A man is justified by his works. Now, what is he addressing? He's addressing because Paul talks about justification. But Paul doesn't talk about justification apart from work. Many people have interpreted Paul to be an anti-law person. What Paul was anti-law was not the law of Jehovah, but the law of the Pharisees, which he used to be one. The Pharisees didn't keep the law. They put burdens on people they themselves were not willing to carry. Likewise also was not Rahab the harlot justified by works when she had received the messengers and had sent them out another way? For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead. Now, Martin Luther is reading this stuff, especially after the stuff he's preaching, is reading this, and he says James should be ripped out of the Bible. James does not belong in the Bible. That's what he said. The founding father of the Christian church, if you would. Folks want to say, well, Paul is the founding father. No, Paul didn't start Christianity. People interpret Paul, and Paul wasn't teaching the things that they were saying Paul taught. Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy argue that this passage disproves the doctrine of justification by faith alone, or sola fide, whereas the early and many modern Protestants continue to believe that Catholic and Orthodox interpretations do not fully understand the meaning of the term justification and resolve James and Paul's apparent conflict regarding faith and works in alternative ways from the Catholics and Orthodox. Protestants believe Paul was dealing with one kind of error while James was dealing with a different error. The errors Paul was dealing with were people who said that works of the law were needed to be added to faith in order to help earn God's favor. Paul was dealing with this issue. And we know that Paul was dealing with this issue because when we look at, and at some point we'll look again at Acts chapter 15, when individuals came to Antioch and they were teaching that a person had to first be, they had to first undergo Brit Milah, or they had to be circumcised according to the law of Moses before they could be saved. What they were actually teaching is that since faith came to the Jew first, that you had to become a Jew first. That you had to convert to Judaism first before you can be a believer. every Gentile had to convert to Judaism. Now, believe it or not, most people today, when they come to the realization that the Christian church has been teaching them wrong, they're compelled to begin to look down the path of Judaism, specifically Judaism with a twist of Yeshua, Messianic Judaism. And this is why they want to practice the things. See, Judaism is appealing. Messianic Judaism is appealing to people who want faith in Messiah without going all the way in Judaism. So they borrow a lot of Judaism to make it look authentic. And now you got people looking like Jewish wannabes. And the biggest question when you and your family decide that you're going to begin to keep the commandments of Jehovah, not the law of Moses, as it is called, people want to say, okay, well, you're trying to become Jewish. Why is it that you're trying to become Jewish? Because you decide to keep the law. Because people have been brainwashed into believing that the law was for the Jews, and the only people who keep the law is Jewish people. So if you're starting to keep the law, you must be trying to convert to become a Jew. Paul countered this error by pointing out that salvation was by faith alone, apart from deeds of the law, Galatians 2:16 and Romans 3. Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith. Now, I underline this so that you will see this. Because so often people read over of, instead they read in. He's not saying, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Messiah. Not faith in Messiah. Now, this is important. This is important. We're going to deal with this as we're talking about the true gospel of the kingdom, which is I'm going to start teaching on this Sabbath. And then as we continue on, as we begin to deal with faith and understanding faith, and the many facets of faith as it is taught in the Bible, knowing this, that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Messiah Yeshua, even we have believed in. Now you see this? Those who believe in are justified by the faith of. There is a difference. Having the faith of Messiah, not just faith in Messiah. But if that's not enough, even we have believed in Messiah Yeshua that we might be justified by the faith of Messiah and not by the works of the law. Now, what he's addressing here is that there are some things that the law and those who teach the law, because guess what? How would people know anything about the law other than from those who are supposed to be teaching the law? If you have a non-Jewish person who don't have access to the scrolls, they don't have the scrolls or the prophets, they don't have any of the writings, all they have is what they see those people who are supposed to be following the law, what they do. That's what they see. They don't know the law, just like you got people today. What they know about Christianity is from what they have seen Christians do. They haven't read the Bible. How can they know about the word of Jehovah and they haven't even read the Bible? They've read Christians. That's what they've read. Even people in church. You go to church, you sit down among the Baptists, you start looking around and observing how people are keeping this Baptist faith. You can't find the Baptist denomination in the Bible. You can't find the Pentecostal denomination in the Bible. So a Pentecostal do Pentecostal stuff. A Baptist do Baptist stuff. A Methodist do Methodist stuff. A Catholic do Catholic stuff. So you are practicing your faith, and your faith is what you see other people do. And when you are a part of the faith, and people who are leading people in the faith, and you who are in the faith is not doing what other people in the faith is doing, then they now think you are a wolf. Well, wait a minute, brother. Now, you've been coming here. You ain't been baptized. You haven't joined the church. You haven't accepted our statement of faith. You're not, when other people are up rocking, you sitting there looking. You never come to the altar for prayer. Do you understand? You don't look like one of them. So if you don't look like one of them, you are an odd duck. So to keep from being an odd duck, what do? When they stand up, you stand up. Okay, people are standing up. I don't know why I'm standing up, but I'm going to stand up. You know what I'm saying? They face the east, you face the east. And when they in some churches, you know what they do? They don't pass the basket because you could be incognito. They have people get up, go to the altar, put your money in, and keep on moving. Now imagine if you don't get up. So you got your little quarter in your hand real tight. You get up, put your hand all the way down in the basket. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I mean, looking at me like you don't know what I'm talking about. I know you don't. Because you want to fit in. People want to fit in. You don't want to look odd. And so he's talking about the faith of Messiah. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. We're not trying to get justified by keeping the law. We're keeping the law because we have been made righteous. Therefore, by the deeds of the law there shall no flesh be justified in his sight, for by the law is the sin of knowledge. But now the righteousness of God without the law is manifest, being witnessed by the law and the prophets. Even the righteousness of God. Now, Paul, you notice here in Galatians, he uses this word, of, faith of. And then he uses the same word in Romans. Even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of Messiah Yeshua, unto all and upon all them that believe. Is that in your Bible too? Faith of. Now you notice we don't see that. And so I'm pointing it out. Why is an of such a big issue? Because now what it's saying is that I have to watch what Yeshua did. I have to see what he did. While I was in California, and this was really the message, is that we learn by two ways. We learn by what we see, and we learn by what we hear. Yeshua taught by two ways. He taught by what he did, and he taught by what he said. The most effective teaching Yeshua did was by what he did. People weren't drawn to Yeshua because of his message. People were drawn to Yeshua because of what he did. People heard about what he did. They didn't hear about what he preached. And they came from miles and miles and miles and miles and miles around because of the work that he did. And he said that the works that I do, you shall do, and greater works than these. When we went to Israel, the issue was, and what Father says, is don't go over there trying to preach the Torah. Go and show them faith. Go and show them the works of the Spirit. And in that, you can avoid some of the arguments, but you'll notice that when people see the power of the Almighty, they're more apt to listen to what you got to say. Before that, everybody's got an argument. You can't argue with power. Because this is what they'll say, just like Nicodemus, surely you are one sent from Elohim. Because no man can do the works you do if Elohim wasn't with you. You see. So what Father says to me is, you're not going to be another talking head in this Hebrew Roots movement. You're going to go to the forefront and you're going to show and demonstrate the power of the Almighty. And you're going to call people. And I had folks saying, you know, when you first talked about this healing stuff, my walls went up. I know. So I'm giving people months in advance, because, you know, weeks in advance, you know, they put it out there. And then I had one woman come to me and say, I really wanted to come to your message. I wanted to come and hear you teach on the power. I said, well, where were you? Well, I was over in so-and-so's breakout group. I said, well, you were where you wanted to be. Don't come telling me you wanted to hear me, because if you wanted to hear me, you'd have had your butt sitting in the room where I was teaching it. Don't come flattering me with your words. You were where you wanted to be. Well, ooh. So I ain't playing. Every now and then I got to smile and laugh to let you know I ain't mad at you. I ain't mad at you. But don't come shucking and jiving. Don't come playing with the preacher, because I ain't one of them kind. Your words mean nothing. Your actions is what I'm watching. You were where your feet took you, and your feet took you where you wanted them to take you. Yeah. Wipe that smile right off your face. Even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of, not by faith in, but by faith of Yeshua Messiah, unto all and upon all them that believe. For there is no difference, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Paul also taught that saving faith is not dead but alive, showing thanks to God in deeds of love. Galatians 5:6, for in Messiah Yeshua neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love. So what is he saying? Just because you're circumcised don't give you a leg up. You could be a circumcised individual with no faith. And there were a whole bunch of them in the wilderness. Your circumcision don't mean nothing if you are not operating by faith. And a person who is not circumcised, operating by faith, have the Almighty's attention, just like Cornelius. Cornelius was doing some things. Jehovah says, I got to save this man. He disturbed the apostle, said, go to Cornelius' house. He needs to hear the message of faith, because faith cometh by hearing. And while he was listening, the Bible says the Holy Spirit fell on his entire house. Imagine, because of faith, because of Cornelius' faith, everybody in the house, and he invited some folks. It wasn't just his family. He invited a whole bunch of people to come to listen to the message. Because of Cornelius' faith, all these people got saved, filled with the Holy Spirit. Imagine your life impacting everybody in your life. Protestants also believe James was dealing with errorists who said that if they had faith, they didn't need to show love by a life of faith. And they used James 2:14 through 17. James countered this error by teaching that faith is alive, showing itself to be so by the deeds of love. Protestants believe James and Paul both teach that salvation is by faith alone, and also that faith is never alone, but shows itself to be alive by deeds of love that express a believer's thanks to God for the free gift of salvation by faith in Yeshua. Now imagine this. Because see, this is what people want to talk about. You know, all you got to do is just love, brother. Love. If you love, you fulfill the law. Really? Do you know what love is? And how do you love the kind of love that pleases Jehovah? Because see, you could do all the deeds and works, but Yeshua said it very simply, if you love me, you keep my commandment. James says, here is the love of God, that you keep his commandments. The way you demonstrate your love for the Almighty is how? Keeping his commandments. You can do all these works, you can build and evangelize and do all kinds of miracles, but if you're not keeping the commands, that's all he's asking you really to do. However, here's the question. Was James addressing errors as the Protestants teach? What was James dealing with? Who was James? And we're going to get into this. Who was James writing to? We've already identified he was writing to the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes had knowledge of the commandments. Why was James writing the book of James? James explains to us. What was James' core message? You see, these individuals Martin Luther knew that James was writing to the 12 tribes. Martin Luther also knew he wasn't one of them. So as far as James is concerned, it was irrelevant. Now, these individuals back in the day, they had a different way of approaching the Bible than we do today, because it's been so watered down for many people today. It's all about denominationalism. It's not about Bible. It's about what church you go to. So who was James? The author identifies himself as James in verse 1. A servant of God and of the Lord Yeshua Messiah. And he tells us right there who he's writing to. To the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. To the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Greetings. Not the Gentiles, not the church, as we know that is full of Gentiles, not the Jews, James is very clear. He don't need anybody to interpret what he's saying, because he's made it very clear that he is writing to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Now, James knows some things, because you know what? James is part of that tribe. And we're going to, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I will, and we're going to pick this up next week, because James' core message is a message of faith. It's a message of faith. And he makes it very clear early on, because he's talking about faith throughout his message. Chapter 1, he's talking about faith. Chapter 2, he's talking about faith. Even when he gets to chapter 5, he talks about the prayer of faith. Calling the elders if there's any sick. James teaches us about some faith and encouraging people in their faith, even though they've been scattered abroad. They've been chased out of town. They've been ran out of the homeland. Keep your faith. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, keep your faith. And we're going to see this in a little detail. It is believed that James was one of several brothers of Yeshua and was probably the oldest. Matthew 13:55. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary, and aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Now this Judas here is believed to have written the book of Jude. James to have written the book of James. Neither of them were believers while Yeshua was alive. I'll leave you with that. We'll pick up this next week, and we're going to look at James, and we're going to look at some other passages. Shalom, saints. Tithing and giving first fruit offerings are critical parts of the believer's faith and has its foundation back in Genesis 4:4, when Abel brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And Jehovah had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Abel was commended by Jehovah in Hebrews 11:4, where it states that by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. Solomon said in Proverbs 3:9-10, honor Jehovah with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and your presses shall burst out with new wine. The prophet Malachi wrote in chapter 3, verse 11 and 12, to bring ye all the tithe into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, says Jehovah of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there should not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, says Jehovah of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a delightsome land, saith Jehovah of hosts. When we tithe and give offerings consistently in obedience to Jehovah's commandments, we can count on him to keep his promises to us and consistently meet all of our needs. It is our Father's desire to bless you. However, it begins with you and your act of obedience to tithe and give offerings. Do it today. Shalom. Shalom, saints. I'm Arthur Bailey, and I'm excited to tell you about a new seminary-level online discipleship training program that is now available absolutely free of charge. It is the only internet online discipleship program of its kind that takes a messianic Hebrew roots approach to the study of Scripture. In this online discipleship training program, I will show you how I study the Scripture and prepare to teach, and the study materials I use. You will learn what every messianic should know. You will learn methods of interpretation. You will learn about biblical hermeneutics, the principles of interpretation, and you will learn all about dispensational theology and its origin. You will also learn about the spirit of prophecy and so much more. Upon completion of the training program, you will receive a certificate of completion. Now, you can find out more about this exciting new discipleship training program on the website www.discipleship101.tv. True discipleship training is now free at discipleship101.tv. Check it out today, discipleship101.tv. You have absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain by going to discipleship101.tv. Do it today. You'll be glad you did. It's free at discipleship101.tv. By the way, share it with others. Pay it forward. And remember, it's free at discipleship101.tv. One more time, it's free at discipleship101.tv. Shalom.
For more information, visit www.arthurbaileyministries.com or call 888-899-1479. This program is made possible through financial contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.